Recently we did a video talking about the differences between watercolor, acrylic, and oil. This is not revolutionary. There are lots of videos that you can find on the interwebs on that very topic. And I've looked at a lot of these videos and I found that a lot of them were wrong or biased or incomplete. I'm coming up here as an art supplier. We're not a paint manufacturer, so we kind of offer all these brands and let you try to figure it out. But I'm not necessarily going to be biased about what type of paint to use or what brand to use because we sell it all, right? With that being said, there is even a bigger problem. In fact, most of the time when I post a video regarding paint types, there are at least 1 to 10 comments asking, could you please explain gouache and acrylic gouache? Now, I will again repeat, there are tons of videos on the interwebs on gouache versus acrylic gouache, but they are wrong. So we're going to start in the past, okay? We're talking watercolor and acrylics, okay? On this side, let me reverse that. Let's just move that, or thank you, Jamie. Watercolor and acrylics. I just think it flows better that way. We already know watercolor is transparent by definition. It is water soluble by definition. Watercolor is a very traditional medium. We have discussed how it dries paler in previous videos, not necessarily lighter or darker. We have discussed the fact that oh God, we've discussed so much when it comes to this stuff. I mean, there's literally tons of videos that I've done just describing the differences between the two. But I think for the purposes of this video, the main thing that I want to focus on is that watercolor does not dry waterproof. You can always re-wet it. It is a transparent medium by nature that is part of the design and charm. And when it dries a little paler. And yet, but that's all I want you to worry about now. Now let's go over here. Acrylics. All right, acrylics. Some are opaque, some are transparent. Really doesn't matter, okay? Acrylics dry waterproof. There is acrylic polymer in them. They can be painted on most surfaces. They're flexible. They dry a shade darker to varying degrees depending on the brand, but they dry darker. As the water leaves it, they dry darker. Now I want you to consider why they dry darker. Part of the reason is acrylic polymer is essentially glue, all right? So when you look at a bottle of glue, I mean, we all went to, I mean, I shouldn't say we all, but I mean, a lot of us went to kindergarten, and I remember in kindergarten them always saying when we were gluing things down, don't worry if some of the glue comes out from the sides. Why?
Dries clear.
It dries clearly. That's right. Katie knows. Thank you. Same age. Somehow you look younger. I don't know how you do it. It dries clear. So obviously if there was a whitening agent that then suddenly disappeared, it would make the paint appear darker after the fact. That's just, I don't want to say that's logic, but that makes sense to me, you know? Okay, all right, we've established watercolor, we've established acrylic. Now let's move on to gouache, because gouache in itself shouldn't be that difficult of a concept to grasp. Gouache, in its simplest definition, is an opaque watercolor, okay? So if we've described watercolor as something that dries paler, as something that dries water soluble, all those things apply. But in order for the gouache to become opaque, there have been some things changed to the formula. Now the really high-end gouache, the way they get it opaque, I'm talking about like the Turner design gouache, like the really high-end stuff, the stuff that they were using in the fashion industry for decades. The majority of that opacity comes from a very high pigment load. I hear pigment load, I read pigment load in so much copy. Pigment load, maximum pigment load. We have the most pigment load. Just stop, okay? We know, yes, more pigment can be good. There is more pigment in these because they are designed to be opaque, and these are a high-end gouache. Now, regardless of whether they're high-end or not, there is usually an inert white pigment added in lesser quality brands, probably a lot more, because pigment is more expensive than the inert white pigment, to get it opaque. So these will be very colorful, very vibrant. All right. So why do you want gouache? Why would one want to paint with gouache? If you're comfortable painting with a watercolor, you might find that gouache adds a little something, something. You know, it really does. It's got very vibrant colors. It's a little bit more forgiving in that way that acrylics is, that you can sort of paint over it in a dry brush fashion. It also has a really, really nice matte finish, which is not common in most paints. Watercolor really doesn't apply to that. Watercolor is kind of its own island in terms of like gloss or matte. It's essentially matte, but it's just watercolor. I don't know how to put it. But when the color is that intense, because they're opaque and not transparent like watercolor, you really see the matte-ness of it. Gouache is not flexible. So it is like watercolor in its ability to re-wet. It is unlike watercolor in acrylic, because when it comes to gouache, and this also kind of applies to acryl gouache too. In fact, maybe they apply exactly the same. Darker colors tend to dry lighter, and lighter colors tend to dry darker. Watercolors, as I say, don't necessarily dry lighter, but they dry paler. Gouache, more like watercolor, unlike acrylic, you really don't see the brush strokes. It looks very solid. Okay, there is very low peak retention, right? So sometimes in acrylics, even soft-bodied acrylics, you can still see the brush strokes that go through it. Part of the design of gouache is that it levels, so it's flat, and you don't see a lot of those brush strokes, okay? Whether this is turning you on to gouache or not, I'm just trying to explain to you what it is. If you have ever bought a set of watercolor and it came with a color called Chinese white, that's essentially gouache. That is an opaque watercolor. You'll notice that it can still be picked up after it dries. It might be a little cakey if you have applied it too thick. But you know, gouache is something that's been around a long time, and I think that the artists that use gouache have mastered it. And really, to take the time to use and learn a product like gouache, it really makes you, I don't want to say it makes you elite, but it's so intense. When I think about gouache in general, whether it's just the regular old gouache or this acrylic gouache, it's an intense, vibrant, bold art is what comes to mind, right? Okay, so fine. We have watercolor, we have acrylic, we have gouache. Why do we have acryl gouache? By adding acrylic polymer to a gouache, what is that going to do? Well, it's going to do a couple things. First thing is, it will allow them to add even more pigment while keeping the cracking issue about even. Don't get me wrong, a true acrylic gouache can crack. It's not a flexible gouache. It's a little bit more flexible. In fact, I would say it's fairly flexible when painted in thin layers, although you might not get the same great opacity that you could from, you know, that proper 2-to-1 ratio. But adding more water, you know, or medium to it, you know, you can probably take it and paint it on anything. Acrylic gouache, by taking acrylic and putting it in it, you can literally paint these on anything, like just about anything. I mean boards, any rigid surface. Now you can paint them on stretched canvas, but again, you have to be careful that you don't paint it too thickly. You want to make sure it doesn't crack, but a rigid surface, cracking is not so much an issue. You can paint them on aluminum. You can paint, these are the Alumicomp panels. You can paint them on glass. You can paint them on so many things. You can paint a pumpkin, okay? The acrylic polymer helps make it a little bit more adhesive. It's, like I've always said, like a bit of a glue. So it's a little stickier, which also means it's a little bit, it does not have the waterproof, the absolute definition of acrylic, of waterproof, right? It can't, because it's super saturated with pigment, but it does have more water resistance than if you were just using a regular design gouache, okay? So by adding this acrylic polymer, they are essentially giving you a bit more flexibility. They're giving you literally more flexibility on the types of surfaces that you can use. It allows for the higher pigments to be added, and etc. So yeah, so just paint these on anything, and it's actually pretty impressive. They're the Acryl Gouache in Turner, the jet black, and I'll show this to you. It's almost like a void. Like, it looks like velvet. Like, it looks like one of those like black light posters when you paint that, especially with these fluorescent colors on top of them. As you add acrylic mediums to your acrylic gouache, you will make them more like an acrylic, in that you will make them less opaque, you will make them more flexible, and you will make them more water resistant. Okay, that's because you're adding more of the acrylic polymer. If you add watercolor medium, or we'll just call it water, you are going to make them more like a watercolor. You are going to take away, again, the opacity the more you add. You will be making these shifts. But I come up here and I speak to you now. The catalyst behind this is not so much me trying to convince you that you should or should not be using acrylic gouache. It's this overwhelming anger I've been feeling over just how freaking confusing it is, because every company is saying that they have an acrylic gouache, but they're changing the rules. Now, I'm going to pick on one particular brand, okay? I have no beef with the good people at Liquitex, okay? But they have put out a product that they are calling acrylic gouache, okay? Now, I just came up here and I said to you, acrylic gouache is not flexible, it doesn't dry waterproof, it's got all these things. Well, you got to add water to it, to 2-to-1 rate. There's a lot of steps to that intensity. But they come and they say, hey, guess what? We've made an acrylic gouache that you can just use straight from the tube. It won't crack. It dries matte, and it is a gouache. What I will tell you this really is, what this really is a soft-bodied acrylic with no gloss added to it. There is nothing particularly about this that relates to anything referring to gouache, except for the fact that it is, I don't even want to say it's matte. It's not glossy because they haven't added any gloss, but it's not pigmented like a gouache, which means it doesn't have the coverage of a gouache, which means they are not as opaque as a gouache, which means that because they are completely flexible and can be used straight from the tube, the color intensity is not there. So let me just show you what I mean, okay? I think that this product turns people off to trying the real deal, because I see no benefit of using this if I'm... Why would I go to this if I'm going to get the same results as I would with an acrylic, except it's a little less shiny? Like, I just don't see it. So Katie did this board for me last night. Now you'll see in each square, Katie put these markers, okay? So you can see the opacity, all right? Now, on both of these, this was one pass, and on this side, it was one pass, except for primary red, which we did one pass and then 2 passes, and primary blue. I do not know how well you can see this at home, but it is clear as day to me from where I am right here, looking at Liquitex and Turner. One coat, okay, this is using the 2-to-1 ratio, all right? Their neutral gray 5. Their neutral gray 5. Turner's neutral gray 5. These both say they're acrylic gouache, but I'm telling you that Liquitex, this is not, there's no gouache about it. The only thing that you might say is it's matte, but then you just call it a matte acrylic. It's a matte soft body acrylic. I really don't see anything revolving that involves being a gouache. It does not have the opacity. You can see these corners peeking through underneath the paint, where the coverage with the Turner is complete. I also, and I don't know, again, how much you can see at home, see some brush strokes. Do you see brush strokes? I can see some of those brush strokes. I see a lot less of that, and it's a lot more flat on the Turner side. And I'm just going to allow Will to kind of get a pan of the comparison. Now, don't get me wrong. Outside of this neutral gray 5, these are not the exact same pigment numbers. Okay, we found colors that were close. So I'm not trying to pull a fast one on you. The neutral gray 5 both had the same pigment number. These are just similar colors. Okay, so with that being said, this is a cadmium-free yellow light. For all intents and purposes, it should be a cadmium. Cadmiums, so let's take everything else out of it, okay? Let's say this is an acrylic or an oil. I expect a cadmium to be opaque. It is a very densely opaque color. Yet this permanent lemon, which is not a cadmium, now it's cadmium-free, which it behaves generally like they're cadmiums, I'm seeing a lot of yellow. This is supposed to be the opacest of the opaque. If this is a cadmium gouache, why the hell am I seeing the lines? I mean, why? This is a permanent lemon, also an opaque color, not a cadmium color or cadmium-free color, a very expensive color regardless. And you see, I see no pencil marks laid down beautifully. Now, we talked about sheen. And I really don't know how much I can do on camera to show you sheen. It's like I said, it's not that it's not glossy, it's not semi-gloss, it's just pigment without gloss added in not an extremely concentrated form. So if you go back to the regular gouache, just like lots of pigment will be matte without another agent added. But because these are not that much more pigment, they don't have that jet. Let me just show you with a different example, okay? Because I'm going to ramble up here like for hours. All right. Again, not the same pigments, okay? So don't judge these blacks in terms of their color. This is the Liquitex Mars Black on this side. This is the Turner Acryl Gouache Jet Black on this side, okay? Now you tell me which side has a little gloss to it, or reflection. Not a lot. Which side looks bone dry matte with no brush strokes? Unless the cameras just are really struggling, this is gouache. This is heavy. This is black, jet black, okay? Now, if you put this same pigment into this, it may be a little darker because this is a Mars Black. But again, you're seeing there's a little reflection. There's a little surface color shift. And it's not as flat as this side. Now down here on the bottom, I have painted acrylic on top. So this is the Liquitex Acrylic Gouache on top of the Liquitex Acryl Gouache. This is the Turner Acryl Gouache on top of the Liquitex Acryl Gouache. All right, and you can just look at the opacity difference there. I actually did a second swipe of this as well. And then jump over here, again, this is the Liquitex Acrylic Gouache, one or two coats, versus the Turner Acryl Gouache white. I mean, which of these stands out to you more? I mean, it is blaring. It even dulls down the Turner when it's painted on top of the Liquitex. Look how vibrant that is. Incredibly vibrant. And there are lots of colors that are these luminescent colors, fluorescent colors, which you can do some really cool artwork with because they are black light reactant. The best way I can illustrate this for you is going to be with a photograph. So a while back, I asked Jamie to do two of the exact same painting. One in, what was it, just acrylics? Okay, one in just plain acrylics, and one in the Turner Real Acrylic Gouache, okay? And I want you to look at the differences, okay? I want you to look at the vibrancy of the colors, the richness, the deepness of the black. And it is kind of funny, because a lot of times gloss makes things look blacker than they are. If you think about what plasma televisions did for the black to black ratio on their screen. But this is a very, very dark black, which means everything else pops even brighter. I'm going to make the easiest analogy I can. Why would you want Liquitex Acrylic Gouache? Okay? If you're familiar in painting with acrylics, this is going to paint the same. If you're familiar with soft body acrylics, this is going to paint the same. The only difference that you will notice, unlike their regular soft body acrylics, that I can tell, now I have not spoke to the Liquitex people, but if I was to put down their soft body acrylic next to this, the only thing that I can tell, to the best of my knowledge, is that no gloss medium was added to this. That's it. I don't know where they got the term gouache, why they put the term gouache on there. Quite frankly, I think matte acrylic might be more appealing, but it's not gouache. You use this because it's quicker, easier. The dark side of the Force. This is the Darth Vader, okay, the dark side. All right, now let's look at Luke, all right? You're going to have to practice with this if you're not used to it, okay? It's not quick. It's not easy. You have to only a fully trained Jedi with the Force as his ally can get amazing, amazing results. So you have to go the light path, okay? I just really thought that was very funny and ironic, dark side, light side. I'm not saying that the Liquitex is evil. That's not the point. I'm just trying to make a funny analogy, but it's true. This is not real gouache. If you're using this and you think that you're a gouache painter, okay, fine. I'm not going to sit there and tell you you're not. But you're using an acrylic paint, okay? Super saturated, oversaturated. There is no way in hell that this can be oversaturated in pigment the way acryl gouache does. Because, first of all, you can see it. Where's my thing? I'm going crazy here. You can see it on my sheet, okay? But you cannot make a flexible paint that has oversaturated the acrylic polymer. The acrylic polymer, acrylic paints don't say that they have the highest pigment load because there is a max pigment load to acrylics. There's only so much pigment you can put into an acrylic before it starts to form an acrylic gouache. That's the difference. And when I see this, it upsets me because it's giving acrylic gouache the wrong, I don't want to say a bad name, it's not, there's nothing special about this. If you want a matte acrylic, get a matte acrylic. They do make them. You can always paint a matte medium over any acrylic. It will not be as intense in nature, but you're not going to get intensity anyway if you look at the results that I'm getting with this, okay? I'm talking about people that want to make a statement with their art. Bold, vibrant, it will stand out. If you have your acryl gouache painting here, you can have 4 of the same painting. One's done in acrylics, one's done in watercolor, one's done in oil. I am telling you with peace and love, gouache and acryl gouache stand out because they are super saturated, okay? They will look different. And if you go back to that image again, this is what I'm talking about. You're not getting that from the Liquitex. This is acrylic. They need to take gouache right off the tube. They need to replace gouache and move acrylic down and put matte acrylic. That's what this is, a soft body matte acrylic. That's why you can paint it out of the tube. That's why it's flexible. That's why it seems to magically have none of the flaws of a real acrylic gouache, because guess what? It's not a real acrylic gouache. So that frustrates me. It frustrates me that Jerry's puts this in the acrylic category. It's acrylic-esque. It has essence of acrylic. It is not an acrylic. It is not a gouache. This is its own medium. It's like egg tempera. What the hell is that? Nobody knows either. But this is its own thing. It's its own beast. And I think that we use it in the acrylic category to try to help customers be able to understand it somehow, okay? But I have a feeling it's just making it more confusing. Maybe I'm just making it more confusing. I'm doing my best up here. It's a confusing thing. But the point is, this is not the easiest medium. I am not going to sit up here and say anybody can jump into acryl gouache and have great results. I will say that it's a reasonable medium to learn. okay? It's not as easy to learn as acrylics, but it's definitely not as hard as watercolor. It's in between, because you do have some of that forgiveness with being able to paint over, a little bit of flexibility, but none of that matters. You are painting with acryl gouache, true acryl gouache, Turner acryl gouache, because you want your painting to stand out. If you are in a contest and you want your art to stand out, acryl gouache in its very nature will be a big bright light in the face of the judge, a big bright light in the face of a potential customer. It is a unique medium that is not for the dabbler necessarily. You can dabble. But what this really is a more elegant weapon from a more sophisticated age. Now, everything goes back to Star Wars with me. So if you like shifty, if you like the inflexible, if you like the opaque, then like me on Instagram at Mike Not Jerry, where I will continue to confuse you and hopefully entertain to some degree. This has not been an entertaining video to make, I'll be honest with you. This has been a lot of information and a lot of yelling. It has been. I mean, let's just call a spade a spade. It's like a fire in my loincloth. Serious. But yeah, what this video really is trying to help you guys understand what an acrylic gouache truly is, and how there are products out there that are just so confusing. This will confuse you. It confuses me, and I know this stuff. I've seen Liquitex being made. I didn't see this being made, but I've been to the factories, okay? I've been to factories, I've seen paint being made, I've seen the laboratories that they have and the drawdowns that they do, okay? I'm talking about factories all around the world. I'm not coming up here trying to brag about, like, I've been to all the paint factories, but, like, look, I've done my homework. I've been there. I've talked to the paint makers. These people that have had family recipes for generations. These people that have tweaked it out to the latest of science standards, okay? Been there, done that, trying to pass it on to you. That's the point. So, will you try acryl gouache? Have I completely turned you off to painting altogether? There's a chance of that too. There's a chance. I mean, there is. Now look, you know, watercolor is the best. I mean, these giant tubes can last you forever because you don't use that much paint. You know, if this was acrylic, this tube would barely cover a 16 by 20 canvas, if that. But in watercolor, sky's the limit. Now, this stuff, 2-to-1 ratio, and you get this opacity. 2-to-1 ratio with this kind of opacity. You cannot see, when you go back, Will, the pencil marks. 2-to-1 ratio. So think about how much pigment, how much paint's in there, okay? It's not easy, but nothing worthwhile ever is. That's life. I mean, I don't think I have to tell you that. I don't think I have to tell you that. In fact, we should probably just cut that out because it's just so obvious. Good things don't come to those that wait. They come to those that put in effort and bust their ass and want to do something. To achieve what others don't, you must do what others won't. So take the time, learn about acryl gouache, real acryl gouache, the Turner acryl gouache in particularly. Okay, now again, I came here and said, I mean, we sell this. This is something we sell. So obviously it's like, yeah, of course he wants us to use the acryl gouache. But I'm telling you, I'm showing you, okay? You might find a Liquitex at a local craft store, a local chain craft store. You will not find this there, okay? So you got to come to a place like us because this is the real deal. Not made for the masses. It's made for the people that want to be different. The people that want to have a different statement in their art and to really stand out. Because as I've shown in the comparison, there is no comparison. It's intense. So if you want to know why bother? There you go. Because you will be the one that did what others won't. That's what makes you stand out. That's what makes your art stand out. And that's what makes the Turner acryl gouache stand out. So if you want to give these a try, the best place to get started is that set, that smart set. Here, now I'm really going to get salesy. Not like this doesn't help with a sham wow. This is it. Full instructions on the back, how to use it, okay? This is the same thing that it's just that in a box, okay? We'll unbox it later. That's an unbox and swatch for later. From this, 120 bright, vibrant colors, not muds, not just a little bit of white in the same color. 120 colors with a color chart from this one set. This is the place you get started. And this stuff is confusing. It bothers me. Like I'm gonna need to like talk to my therapist. Like it bothers me. I don't understand it. I don't like it. I don't like bait and switch. I don't like snake oil. And I don't believe that Liquitex went into this with malintent. They didn't mean to fool you. They were trying to simplify it. But by simplifying it, they completely, literally watered it down. Maybe not watered it, acrylic polymered it down so that it lost all gouache properties. It's not a truly matte color. It's not glossy, but that ain't matte. So I can repeat this till I'm blue in the face. I hope you get the point. I hope that when I see the rough of this, I still want to use this video because this is not like my usual shtick, but is real, okay? I think this stuff is great. If you've never tried it, the smart set is a smart way to go. No pun intended. Okay, this is something that I have been asked for specifically. And I have been trying to figure out the best way to present it. And I've gone through all kinds of things in my head. Well, I'll do these paints, this, and that. But I realized I don't need to come up here and paint. The proof is in the pudding. I mean, it's just, there it is. So really, we don't need to post this video at all. Just post a picture of this and we're done. Liquitex matte acrylics, not acrylic gouache. This is not acrylic gouache. How do you sleep at night? Like really, like this is not acrylic gouache. We've done several episodes on Turner Acryl Gouache. If you want to learn more, check out Jerry's Live episode 126, where Amy Gardner-Dean, our resident artist and product specialist, goes over these things in detail. She'll actually be playing with the paint more than I have up here. That video was live, but now resides on both our YouTube channel, and you can find it on our Facebook page. But that will give you a little bit less of a rant and more just information. People come to my videos for rants. This is an artist problem, after all, and if I'm going to have problems, I'm going to be upset about it. It's just the nature of the beast.